Welcome, everyone. It's the Crypto Lark. I'm very excited to have on today John from Fusion. John, how's it going?
It's going great here in New York. Pleasure to be on your show.
Absolute pleasure to be talking to someone from Fusion. Now, this is a project that I reviewed quite a while back, and so it's great to be able to check in with the team and see what you guys are up to, see how the project is developing. Now, just before we do jump into kind of the elevator pitch, I just want to give a big thank you to the team at Fusion for helping to support the channel by sponsoring today's video. So, the elevator pitch. What are you guys doing? For anybody who hasn't heard about Fusion, I mean, I made a review a while ago, but for anyone who hasn't been keeping up to date, what are you guys doing?
Okay. In a nutshell, Fusion is an open source foundation, and we're building the financial fabric of the digital economy. And that's a packed statement right there, right? Financial fabric. Okay. What we want to do is we want to advance digitized assets to the potential promised by the Internet of Value. I'm sure you guys have heard of the Internet of Value. We went through the Internet of Information, and now we want to exchange value with the same global reach and ease that pretty much the Internet Information had. So this is a very wide mandate, and one of the benefits is I get to talk to so many different companies, private organizations, governments, because finance drives the world.
Mm-hmm. That's right, and it's a good elevator pitch because the fabric, right? Just think about how. Yeah. But when we start to think about how much there is out there, right? How many different products and financial services and all these things, we realize there's a lot of business to be disrupted because that business as usual is kind of outdated, right?
Yeah.
And actually creating this Internet of Value, I know it's kind of a term that gets thrown around a lot, but it is the future growing value of the internet where we do have this deep value network, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, and I want to follow that up because in 2018, I think we've proven that digitized assets will work, right? This concept of internet value is going to happen. You're seeing more and more press releases, whether they're central banks themselves starting to experiment with it. Every other day I see some bank now issuing some kind of covered instrument or some bond in a digitized format. It's there,
That's right. I mean, we saw just yesterday or day before Societe Generale, the giant French bank, they did 100 million in bonds, right, to themselves. But, they're just experimenting with the technology is what they're doing when they're doing that.
Yeah.
Now, what are some of the kind of ideal use cases here for Fusion's technology?
Okay. Before I dive into the use case, I think it makes sense to dive maybe just a little bit deeper into what Fusion focuses on when I say the fabric of the financial economy, because that could sound like I'm boiling the ocean, right? Many kind of blockchain companies out there are tackling the financial problems. So two things that I got very excited when I started speaking with Fusion about a year ago. The first area is the interoperability side. Now, it's just like you hear global markets today, everything needs to be connected in the blockchain world as well, right? So Fusion's interoperable solution is quite important for making financial markets in the digital world function much better than it does in the global market today. Second thing that...
Just one follow-up on that before you move on, because the interoperability thing, it's between blockchains, obviously really important, for Fusion to be able to talk to Ethereum or whatever, important. But not every company is moving everything over to that yet. So are you going to have good interoperability with kind of more of the legacy systems that these organizations are already using?
Yeah, so when I say interoperability, it's both for on-chain and off-chain, and we have centralized and decentralized solutions. Fusion is building a platform, right? And there's no one size fits all, especially when you're doing this early on in the R&D stage of a new technology. Everybody's trying to experiment with slightly different type of approach. Everybody has a slightly different legacy system they have to bring on. So working with it, with governments, for example, they're certainly not going to start with a decentralized system and start issuing bonds in a decentralized manner. That's quite dangerous. And they also sit on a bunch of private sensitive data that they're not going to throw into a decentralized world. They're not going to throw my social security number and say, hey, everybody, here you go. This is John, right? So we have to be sensitive with each of these industries. Like, what is the best way that we can get them comfortable with the technology and move them into kind of the possibilities that we all see?
Very cool.
Yeah. So then moving on to the second point that I mentioned, this is every asset that you digitize, we actually want to unlock the full time value of that digital asset. And I just threw a term out there, time value of the digital asset. I'll explain that a little bit. You probably heard the time value of money, or maybe you've heard time is money, right? The corollary of that is, if I give you $10 today, it's worth more in your hands today than it is if I gave that $10 10 years from now, right? You could invest that money, you could do something. Hopefully you don't lose it in your investment, but let's be optimistic, right?
You got to hope you're a good investor.
Yeah, clearly that wasn't me. But if we think that money, that dollar bill, is just a store of value, well, crypto assets, they're a store of value. Your house is a store of value. So every asset has a time value, right? When you digitize this asset, if I can help you extract different value from your time, that is like immense value add to the asset itself that you previously could not have before. It's best if I explain that with an example. Simplest thing that people get is, here's a house. Okay, I can sell you this house today and you can own that from now to forever. That's pretty good. But what if I were to tell you, you know what, you can still own this house from 6 months now, but I'm gonna rent this house from you for the first 6 months and I'm gonna pay you some money, right? Great news. Now I, as the house owner, I get to get the rental and I still get to keep the appreciation of that house, right? So I'm keeping the future time value of my house and selling the front value of that house, right? Now let me flip that out just a little bit more. What if I told you, I will keep my house for the next 6 months, and from 6 months forward, you can have my house, but I want my money today. That's actually a future, and people trade that financial instrument today as futures. You hear it as equity futures, commodity futures. All these instruments, all these transactions, what are they actually doing? They're actually just manipulating different aspects of time in this asset that you've actually put on, put into the digital format. So that's a very important function, and a very simple function actually, that Fusion enables for the digital world.
Very, very cool. And so that can be applied right across the board to shares, bonds, debts, futures, all that kind of stuff can have that kind of inbuilt functionality.
Yeah, and even more, like when we say bonds, futures, these all sound like financial instruments, but every digital asset, that's why I gave house as an example, right? These are practical things that you're doing. Every digital asset can be used and monetized in such a way. Value can be extracted. Let me start with art, for example. Certainly, you know how I can fractionalize art ownership. That's a very common type of topic. But what if I can say, pledge this art as some collateral so that you can borrow money against it, so that the artists themselves can draw more things? Or what if I said, hey, you know what? This artist, this is Picasso. Let's say he's alive, right? But he does great art. Let me help you participate in his future artworks, but you have to give me some money today so he can actually work on that artwork, right? This is a completely new way, and this is what's so exciting about the Internet of Value, right? We're enabling new ways of extracting value from assets that the financial markets have gotten quite sophisticated at doing, except for they've kind of discovered this over time, and they're almost limited to the institutional investors, right? Like the average person doesn't go in and start talking about futures or anything like that. But with this new way of viewing things, Fusion will enable both the simple type of renting of houses to the sophisticated, let me pledge this house as a collateral or trade a future on this house.
That's really cool. And I think democratizing essentially the ability for capital to move around or for people to invest in different capital instruments is going to be really important, because there are smaller people out there, smaller traders, smaller capital investors, people outside of the big institutions that traditionally play with this kind of stuff that do want a piece of that pie, that do want to be investing. And there's so many ways in which, we're sitting here theorizing about ideal use cases and all this stuff, right? But the reality is that when it gets out there in the wild and people start just building all kinds of stuff on it, doing all kinds of things with it, we're going to see things come up that we're not even necessarily thinking about, or that aren't talked about, that might become the killer use cases for this kind of technology, which is also very exciting.
You're spot on. There are things that none of us can think about. It's the same argument you heard with the internet itself. No one thought what we could possibly do today. The phone that's in my pocket, so I'm quite old despite how I look, but you know, like the possibilities that's on that phone, I could never have envisioned when I was in college in 2000. But an interesting fact, you know, the examples that I gave you, I'm actually in discussion with strategic partners doing exactly that, right? Artworks, people actually trying to digitize this artwork. Yes, it's been done. People pledging these digital assets as collateral or letting people participate in future earnings. We're working on it with some of our partners already. And I can't give you the name yet, but you'll be seeing news coming out from Fusion over the next couple of weeks, just all the people that and industries that we've been discussing. The artworks make a lot of sense. Songs make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You know, media channels, actually, that something like a YouTube media channel, such as yourself, right? You know, imagine your asset is your media channel, and that generates a certain amount of revenue. What if you wanted people to crowdfund you because you have some big production going on? You could pledge a portion of your future earnings of your asset, which is your media channel. And that's quite an exciting opportunity for everybody, right?
Yeah, and you can really see the application of that for music files and things like this. You know, the ability of this to, you know, for people to invest in this, to have shares based on, you know, like Kickstarter and stuff like that. You think about how that's worked, and it's just been a total unaccountability, and it's basically just, you know, throwing money at something hoping you get something back later, versus like actually investing in the musicians and saying, hey, well, we're going to give you the money, but we'd like, you know, 20% of your record sales or whatever later on when it comes to that stage. That is a game-changing model.
Exactly. That's a benefit of the blockchain, because a lot of these things actually take place today, right? They take place in handshake deals, right? You know, Bowie bonds, you probably heard of it. Sure. I mean, that was where, you know, intellectual property of a song, David Bowie, was pledged as collateral and issued out. People got interest. David Bowie's got some money ahead, you know, in return for that. But not many people actually know about such things. And it's almost like you don't have a digital place where people can just go and look and see through transparency, smart contracts. I mean, this is all the kind of good stuff that blockchain's enabling for a future.
That's right. It's about transparency, and that's a big part of what we have missed. I mean, he said about the institutional investors, and they're operating in a world of, you know, cloaks and daggers and shadows, and you don't really know what's going on there. But in the blockchain world, you can't hide things. It's all there, and that's what's really important.
Not as bad as cloaks and daggers and shadows, but I think I'm biased.
I just imagine what Jamie Dimon does on Wall Street, and that's the world I imagine.
I spent 20 years in Wall Street, so there's not really close and daggers. Really, everybody's just, you know, hard trying to work on things.
Yeah, I know. And we've actually seen a lot of innovation coming out of Wall Street, actually, when it comes down to it. And, you know, we can see even what JP Morgan has done with, you know, Ethereum, for example, and their quorum and all that stuff. That's a whole other story. Now, I actually wanted to ask you about Ethereum is, so right now, a report came out the other day about some of the world's biggest companies and what blockchains they're using. They're using Ethereum, they're using Hyperledger. How do you sell Fusion to these institutions over Ethereum?
Like anything, the interoperability is the answer right there, right? You want to use Ethereum, you want to use Hyperledger, you want to use Hedera. I mean, there's so many different type of technologies out there. I'm not arguing one is better than the other. But what I am seeing is that if you commit yourself to one technology, you're going to have a hard time integrating all the other data points that come through. Okay, so with the Fusion blockchain, let's say you use our protocol or libraries, you're not committing yourself to just Fusion because now all of a sudden some important identity data or some great solution came up on an EOS chain that now you have to build some kind of gateway to bring that in. It's heavy maintenance. Mm-hmm. That is a key of the first point we mentioned, interoperability, right? And it's interoperability not just of the tokens in the form of, you know, value crypto tokens, interoperability in the form of data that you bring in. Like, we're talking to some interesting identity companies right now where, yeah, their technology is revolutionary. Yeah, they do some kind of semi-private data view on it, on an identity, like my social security's got to be private, but me as a general person, that can be public. That's built on a certain type of blockchain. Mm. How do you bring that into JP Morgan's Ethereum blockchain, right?
That's it. And those kind of stages of interoperability super important,
Yeah.
super important. And that's I think that's how the whole crypto space needs to move forward. But I'm excited to see that's such a big focus of what Fusion is doing, because anyone who's not working on interoperability right now is going to really struggle later on. And it's a big focus of what quantum is, of what Fusion is doing. Think of your quantum swap technology, but what Fusion is doing, and that is super exciting. Now, we have PSN 2.0. What is this? What is this? Can you break it down for us?
Payable Stage Network 2.0. In a way, the simplest state is we are testing the functionality with the community, right? When you're talking about interoperability, when you're talking about such heavy things as creating assets and quantum swap, you don't just want to go live. Like any product development, to be foolish to go from, waterfall development. I've been working on this internally, and surprise, we're live and ready for people to use. Okay? So this is Fusion's way of testing with our community, because we are a foundation, right? So we rely on our community as much as we rely on our own developers to help us grow this technology. The beauty of the Payable Stage Network is, of course, number one, it helps us find the bugs and make and optimize things, but you can actually already build on this, right? When I'm talking to our strategic partners, they're using the libraries and experimenting on our Payable Stage Network already.
Nice. Nice. So they're kind of in there essentially playing around in the sandbox, seeing what's possible, experimenting with the technology, and then, later on they can actually take that into more of a mainnet situation.
Yeah,
right?
and when to do the transfer to mainnet, is simplistically pointed to a different set of servers, right? If we've done everything correctly, which we hopefully have, like all the libraries are backward compatible, like you don't have to rebuild anything.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think that really allows a lot of flexibility for companies to be able to play around, and then when they're ready, jump into the water, basically.
Exactly.
Which is very cool. Now, what about the, this is a conversation we throw around a lot in the blockchain space, and it's, got its levels of importance, but in terms of speed of what Fusion is doing right now, I mean, what's the kind of throughput value? What are our kind of transactions per second we're looking at?
Okay. Now, of course, this is a stage network, and I'm sure you get this type of disclaimer all the time, right? Right now, we're focused on the functionality itself, making sure it's stable, and we're going to go and optimize the speed. Now, to your question, currently the transactions per second that we're seeing is about 20 transactions per second. It's not going through any type of optimization. We expect that to increase dramatically as we move on to mainnet. Our average block processing time is about 15 to 20 seconds per block. But again, we're not focused on yet speeding that up. It's all about making sure we can protect all the assets that are going to be in our system first, and the quantum swap, which is the ability to swap different assets, works smoothly without any bugs.
Nice. Now, recently you guys released the Asset Gateway. What is that?
That is I think of that as a part of the hybrid solution we offer. Remember how I said earlier, there are centralized and decentralized solutions for everything? Well, the Asset Gateway is a centralized solution for our interoperability. It serves two things. Number one, there's actually a business need where people need to build a centralized gateway because they might want to experiment in a small side chain, or they might want to have more control about the assets they're bringing in. That's why it's a centralized gateway. And number two, it helps us basically demonstrate these different assets in our system and stress test kind of, how much can our chain take, right? Without waiting for the decentralized solution to go live. Like DCRM, Distributed Control Rights Management, is our decentralized solution, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, well, let's just go ahead and jump right into that. Actually,
right.
Let's just go. That's the next question here. So let's do that.
That wasn't scripted, but the DCRM is actually what got a lot of people excited. In addition to the whole time lock, when Fusion first did its fundraise back in 2018, right? Distributed control rights management is a way that we can, in a decentralized fashion, have custodian accounts for external chains, right? So we can actually manipulate, we can actually control tokens that sit on external chains through our Fusion network. And that's the holy grail of interoperability, right? So if I'm operating within Fusion and I can trade and somehow also control my assets that are sitting on Ethereum or sitting on Bitcoin or sitting on EOS, Well, we solved the interoperability problem, right? Because all your functionality that's sitting within Fusion, all the transactions that you're doing with Fusion, you can reflect that impact external chain assets. Yeah.
That's really crazy actually when you think about it. Like
Yeah.
you know, move your Bitcoin around or move your Ethereum around or whatever it might be and initiate those kind of swaps and things. That's really powerful.
And the fact that it's decentralized, so that sound, what was the difference between centralized and decentralized? Decentralized means there's no one person that has control to this gateway. There's no one node that someone can hack and basically take away your private keys and say, oh, guess what, John? All that awesome interoperability across, Bitcoin and Ethereum, I got your private keys now, so I'm taking care of all your assets. Right? The DCRM actually shards the keys out so that none of the nodes have a full key of these custodian wallets. Furthermore, when we're actually doing transactions of actually signing things, basically locking things into and out of our system, we never expose the private key itself. And we use this through some threshold ECDSA algorithm, like the whole curve digital signature algorithm, right? Which is quite revolutionary. And that's you'll probably seen recent news where we had 4 of the cryptologists that joined Fusion to work with us because it's such cutting edge technology.
Yeah, I did see that announcement. It was really cool to see that, the cryptographers are just coming in.
These are the people who actually wrote foundational papers around the encryption algorithms that we've used, right? Like Dr. Pascal Pallier, Pallier encryption algorithm. That's the guy,
That's the guy.
I don't think you can get any more innovative than that, right? You have to forgive my pronunciation of the name, but Dr. Stephen Goldfeather, again, ECDSA, one wrote institutional, innovative papers around that algorithm. It's a very exciting time for us.
That's really cool, actually.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to the kind of level of technology being developed that you do have these people who look and see it and go, wow, we want to be part of that. We like what they're doing. We want to be part of that. So that's definitely very cool. Now, I wanted to swing back around to kind of the partnership side. Now, Noah mentioned a bit of it earlier, and right now you guys have got like, 12 billion in assets committed to coming on to Fusion, and that's across a whole different range of, different kinds of assets that are going to be actually deployed. But we do have one of those partnerships that have been announced. You teased us a little bit earlier that you guys are going to be, announcing more partnerships over the coming weeks, but I want to explore the one that we actually have right now, and that's AXP. So you can tell us who they are and how they're using your technology.
Okay. Automotive Exchange Platform. That's what AXP stands for. And they're just the best partner because, look, they are in the auto industry and they realize that whole industry is hobbled by bad data. So from the point that I go and try to get auto insurance to the point that I try to buy a car, to the governments themselves actually trying to track, my license and registration, there's a bunch of redundant data and actually misinformation that's in there. That's just the natural system of how these big systems have grown over 50, 60 years that our economy's developed, right? So blockchain is a perfect solution on that when you have aligned parties across private and public organizations who all rely on the same data. And that's why AXP looked at blockchain and turned to Fusion, right, to help them build this solution. Now, if they just went and tried to tackle that entire ecosystem, I think they would be spending the next 20 years trying to build it, right? So like any good product, right, they chose Fusion and we chose financing as the first place to build out their platform. Why is financing so important? What I mentioned before, what is Fusion strong in? Building the financial fabric. And so we're going to actually take care of tracking the auto loans, packaging those loans up, and lining up investors on the other side to participate in these loans. This solves 2 primary problems. Number one, it makes the whole movement of money more efficient. If I can line up a borrower with an investor faster without middlemen, guess what? The velocity of money is faster and therefore the cost of the transaction goes lower. The second one, data. When I take a loan out on a car, there's some pieces of information that's quite important. Me as an identity is collected, like my credit score, for example, my earnings for the last couple of 2 to 3 years. The car itself is collected, collateral around the car, vehicle identification number, what type of make, what type of model it is. And finally, the actual bank who's making this loan itself. Like, these are three very important pieces of information that power the rest of this ecosystem, right? If I have such clean identity, guess what? When I take out the title and the license, I've already got pieces of that information in the system. So that's the AXP product.
That's really cool, actually. And anyone who's ever bought a car, I think, can automatically understand the importance of that kind of technology to have this interoperable piece of information, basically, which is what it boils down to being.
You're pretty much sitting in the dealer for 3 to 4 hours, and this is certain dealer experience, like the independent dealers, pretty much waiting for a bank to approve your loan, right? So that's a bad experience for the borrower, which is going to be the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire automotive industry is just suffering because there aren't enough lenders for people who are looking to borrow. And now if we're able to connect through digital assets, somebody in the Middle East or in the UK or in Europe who are kind of starved for yield, like in Europe, you're dealing with negative interest rates in certain countries. All of a sudden, a stable backed security with 6% or 10%, whatever the type of composition is going to be, type of interest, is a very attractive investment for those investors.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about opening up global capital, people not being stuck in their little walled gardens, which might be their countries or the regions, whatever it might be. Now, John, the final question for you: what can we expect in the rest of 2019 from Fusion?
So there are two sides of it, two primary sides. I'm after product, right? So from the strategic relationship sides, in the coming weeks, as I hinted, you're going to see many news coming from us because we've been working hard, talking to people, applying our technology, and this crosses the gamut from the government side to the private organizations and many different industries. So that's one of the main things you're going to see, the actual adoption of the Fusion technology as we're building out this fabric. The second thing is, of course, we now are testing out our technology is becoming more mature. So the biggest thing that people keep asking is, when is the mainnet launch? Yeah. Now, target there is going to be after the first half of 2019. And it all depends on how the stage network is doing. But we wouldn't launch anything ahead of its time, as much as we want to, right? Stability is always key, especially when you're dealing with people's assets.
Amen. Good tech takes time. I say this all the time on the channel. I think anyone who's never built something, especially something as complex as this, has a hard time understanding that, we have our goal. We would like to have it out by this time, but the reality is if you get to that 11th hour situation, like, you know what? We need another month. We need another 6 weeks, whatever it's going to be, because it's got to be right. It's not just about getting something out. It's about doing it right, and that's the most important thing.
Correct. And then the DCRM, the decentralized solution, I mean, that is also going to be going into more robust testing now that, we're working with these chief cryptologists, when we already have a version out there where people can test, but we're working on the next evolution, right? So throughout 2019, we're going to launch a beta version, and then we're going to start merging the two together, right? DCRM is a module that plugs into mainnet. It's another different type of solution that we're going to offer anybody who is adapting the Fusion protocol.
Very cool. For anyone who wants to find out more information, of course, there'll be a link to the Fusion website down below. You can also check out their Twitter to, see when those new partnerships do get announced. John, thank you so much for coming on the channel and telling everyone a little bit about Fusion.
Thank you very much for having me.